Charles Krauthammer, beloved columnist, father, husband, of course, contributor to Fox News, Pulitzer Prize winner, political commentator, died today at age 68. His death was a shock, but of course was not unexpected. He told us 2 weeks ago that he had terminal cancer and not too long to live. But Charles became an almost kind of larger-than-life figure during his decade here at Fox News. He was one of the most respected political analysts in Washington, I think in the United States, no doubt about it, and a beloved presence in the newsroom here. And Charles was seldom at a loss for words, but he often put others in that position, as I know personally. But it was his humor, I think, that a lot of us, as we smile tonight remembering him, are thinking about tonight.
All kinds of folks for the last year, you know, in the end, Hillary's not going to run. And I'd said 100% she's running unless she's struck by lightning. There was no lightning that I could see. I think there's some people who don't, you know, who get in, and they're not going to get out unless they're beaten. Speaking as an amateur psychiatrist. Look, so what if you look like Lucky Luciano? That doesn't matter to us at all.
So your question, and that's Trump for me. I'm going to take that if you don't mind.
It.
Okay. It's hilarious.
No, I think he was calling me.
He was definitely calling you.
Calling
no, but wait a second.
Mars Polander says, what's the difference between a Democrat and a socialist?
A Democrat is a socialist with a filter.
Are we going to fight like they did?
No, we only do that every once in a while.
I said here a week ago that it will snow in hell before the Obama DOJ goes after Hillary. I'm willing to entertain a belief in climate change.
Wait, let me write that. I'm going to tweet that out right now, just that part.
Let's bring in our distinguished panel of Charles colleagues to discuss his remarkable life and career. And on the phone with us is Fox News chief political anchor and special report anchor Bret Baier. Here in the studio, of course, Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume, associate editor and columnist at Real Clear Politics, A.B. Stoddard, and Fox News contributor Charlie Hurt, opinion editor and columnist for the Washington Times. All of you, a sad night, but boy, do we have so many. All of us have so many memories of Charles. Before we go to the panel here, Bret, you sat in this seat so many nights, of course, as did Brit Hume, with Charles to your right, and it was always a rollicking ride in commercial breaks where all the fun usually happens, and in the online special show where Charles was even funnier than he was on the panel. Some reflections tonight.
Yeah, you know, it's a bittersweet moment because I like looking back at those moments and the fun and the humor. I just talked to Daniel, who was at his dad's side, along with Robin, his wife, and they've been heartened by some of these memories and some of the stories, and looking at their dad in his prime. Charles could lighten up a room. He could crack a joke. He was my first baseman there on the panel for almost 10 years, and before that, alongside Brit Hume. And he could cut through the noise of the day and then crack us up in the commercial breaks like nobody else could. So he just had a gift. His writing was unlike, I don't think you're going to see another columnist that had his penetrating kind of wisdom and thoughts. And we're going to try to use that as we go on because he's commented on every issue on the day. And we'll bring him into the conversation as we go forward.
Brit Hume.
You know, we've known this was coming for some weeks now. It barely lessens the sadness of this moment. But what that means is that Charles had a chance in the last few weeks of his life to hear how we all felt about him. The kind of tribute you just heard from Bret, what some of the rest of us have been saying all day, it wasn't just that he was so brilliant, although he certainly was. He was also so very kind and funny. And we loved him. All of us around here loved him. Those of us who might be considered big shots loved him. Everybody else loved him as well. So I hope he knew that. I suspect he did, and I'm glad for that tonight.
And everyone from the makeup artist to the guys behind the camera who do such great work.
Exactly right.
And women behind the scenes. And everyone knew him. He didn't want to be treated differently, though, than anyone else. You pointed that out.
You know, you're talking about the breaks. When back in the days when I was doing a special report and Charles was on, he would come in early because of the wheelchair, because it took a little longer to get him in position, so he didn't come in with the other panelists. He came in early, which meant that there were 2 commercial breaks between the time he arrived and the time the rest of the panel came in that I got to spend with Charles. And every now and then he would say a kind word to me about my work, and I always felt like, you know, the earth and everything that was in it had just been conferred upon me when I got a compliment from Charles Krauthammer. That's how much I respected him, and we all did, and how much I loved him.
AB, there was a moment on the Daily Show that I had not seen until just before this show tonight. I'd like your reaction and your thoughts. Let's watch.
30 years. Do you ever look back on some of these writings and think, what was I thinking?
It's worse than that.
Good.
When the worst part of writing the book was going all the way back and reading the 1,000,000 words I've written. I couldn't believe I'd written some of that stuff.
So there's been, what's the growth process been like?
The growth process?
Yes.
Well, I was once a liberal.
So the early writings showed hope.
And then came change.
I mean, AB, you sat next to him on so many evenings here.
Just brilliant. Well, I wrote about him last week, and I said that the only debate that I ever won in 9 years was on the super committee, which was the debt cutting committee, which fell flat on his face. But he wrote with great hope about how it might all work out, and it was really going to be a great opportunity. And when I busted him about it, when it all folded, he said, well, that was one of the times where I just wasn't cynical enough. And that was really the only, he was never wrong if his prediction didn't come true. It's usually because he hadn't been cynical enough. But for someone who was so cynical, he was also always full of hope and joy. And he really delighted in the little things. And that was an incredible combination, so stoic, so strong because of his battle and what he had to surmount in the wake of it. But then just as someone who really delighted in just the warmth and exchange with people. He loved people. And we had a night right here at this table. I'll never forget it. It was early on when I didn't know him well. And I was seated in between them, and Steve and Brett, I think, were making some college over drinking jokes or something. And out of nowhere, Charles said, that commercial always stayed with me. Schaefer, it's the only beer to have when you're having more than one. And then he paused, perfectly timed. More than one what? And then, of course, it was right back to the panel, and we were back on camera, and I was practically under this table. But his comedic timing was unbelievable. But also, sometimes he just had the delight of a small kid. It was really something to behold.
And a psychiatrist, Harvard Medical School, Pulitzer Prize, more awards than we can list here. But Charles, when he wrote about a political movement or event, he wrote about it in a way that, I don't know, he cut through where so many others were mired in minutia. On President Reagan, I love this part. Of course, this was after Reagan's death. He wrote, optimism is the perfect way to trivialize everything that Reagan was or did. Optimism? Every other person on the number 6 bus is an optimist. What distinguished Reagan was what he did and said. Reagan was optimistic about America amid the cynicism and general retreat of the post-Vietnam era because he believed unfashionably that America was both great and good. And I love it because everyone's like, he's like an old uncle. He's, Reagan is so optimistic. But it was optimistic about the goodness of America. And I love the fact that he pointed that out because he always was cutting against the conventional wisdom.
And that, of course, in and of itself is the ultimate optimistic view of America. Of course, I've had the pleasure of knowing Charles far less than anybody sitting at this table. But I remember being a younger boy, growing up in a small town. And we got the Washington Post, and I remember my father would rip out his columns and send them to me and give them to me, and and that had a profound impact on my interest in newspapers and obviously politics. He was obviously brilliant, funny, all these things, but the title of his book, Things That Matter, I think was the most perfect title of a book that way, with the things that were important and the things, like he said, the things that mattered.
Think about that, Laura. That book was a collection. Collections basically don't sell.
Oh my God, it was on the bestseller list for like, what, a year and a half?
Like hotcakes for years. And I think people are still buying it. I've got a copy of it.
I was on the train yesterday, come back from New York, and I saw there's a guy sitting there, at one of the tables reading that book.
Also, I do want to mention Brett's special, which we've referred to throughout the night, but people have to take that hour and sit down. It is absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah, well, it's tomorrow night, 9 p.m. on Fox News, and so many, I can't wait to watch it. I've seen bits and pieces, but I haven't watched the whole thing. Brett, the night after night after night, election nights, primary nights. Look, Krauthammer, was tough on the Trump campaign, but also very fair after Trump. He and I got into some legendary battles on the panel in the run-up to the election with George Will, his best friend, and it was a spirited debate. Was always so much fun, though. He was such a great sparring partner on the issue of rising populism versus the old Bush globalism, interventionism. He loved the philosophical back and forth that I think makes Special Report such an important show to have featured him. And I know Brit Hume was the first one to really put him on this show, that show first. And that made the difference on that panel. He really, I know you've missed him since. We've all missed him here at Fox.
Yeah, he really was a powerhouse. And he loved getting into the politics. He loved engaging with you and Tucker and others on the issues of the day political wise. I did that candidate casino where I tried to get panelists to put chips and bets on potential candidates. We had 17 at the beginning of this process, Republicans. And so he did not put any money on Trump. And eventually he was begrudgingly putting 5 and 10, and he would always put 5 chip on Wine, Women, and Song. And he just had a great time with it. He was somebody who I think touched people in a way that even if you didn't agree with him, you kind of nodded your head and said, all right, I get that.
Britt, Trump, we think of what's happening to the big immigration debate, the separating the families. And I just want to know what Krauthammer would be saying about this.
Me too.
I just want to okay, what would he say? What would he say about the Nazi concentration camp issues?
I think this about Charles. He was greatly offended by Trump. Trump was absolutely not.
Yeah. Oh no, he was a Bulgarian. Let's be honest. He thought, as just George Will, Trump is a horrible Bulgarian.
Exactly.
That he did believe that.
Yeah,
right? Let's just be honest.
I think he thought he was politically ignorant and not
well read, et cetera,
and mendacious and all the rest of it.
No love lost between them.
Exactly. But once Trump was nominated, and particularly after he became president, I think Charles, like some of the rest of us, was deeply offended by the coverage of him. And he was very fair to Trump during the course of his presidency, for as long as Charles was able to witness it, which was in excess of a year before we lost him to this terrible illness.
He had a column in 2011, AB. It was called Alone in the Universe. It's one of those columns, you see the titles, I got to read it. So I went back and read it today. This is at the end. We was talking about how many galaxies, constellations, life on other planets, and so forth. And he said at the end, we grow justly weary of our politics, but we must remember this. Politics, in all its grubby, grasping, corrupt, contemptible manifestations, is sovereign in human affairs. Everything ultimately rests upon it. Fairly or not, politics is the driver of history. Now, I think I debate him on that because I don't know if politics is that important in most people's lives, but it was important to him. And he thought the debates that we were having, and of course that was 2011, that was during the Obama administration, all the big, questions about how we handle terror and other countries' foreign affairs were very important. But he always had a very interesting kind of clinical take, psychiatrist take on the afterlife, whether there was an afterlife. And I just wonder, I just want to have a conversation about this. When I read this today, I'm like, this is why I love being on with Krauthammer.
I know we all do, but that's what was so wonderful about his columns is they would go off on all these other huge topics.
Right. Being a father.
And his perspective was so broad. But the thing about how much he loved politics and believed it was important, the debate and the discourse was so important, even though it's eroded and degraded so rapidly, he really believed that everyone should be persuadable, at least around the edges. And he didn't like people who weren't willing to just be persuaded a bit here and there. And so he tried to bring that to his argument. And most of the time it worked on people. They would say, even if I didn't agree at the end, I really saw how well he made the point. And so he engaged them. And that was an art of persuasion in itself.
Charlie, you've written a lot of columns in your day and coverage on being a columnist, he wrote. Longevity for a columnist is a simple proposition. Once you start, you don't stop. You do it until you die or can no longer put a sentence together. It's always been my intention to die at my desk, although my most cherished ambition is to outlive the estate tax. Well, he almost did. We doubled the estate, exemption, so he did pretty well on that. But again, humor in the face of difficulty, and I don't know. That was just another. We'll let you close it.
But I think he would agree with you in terms of politics is not what everything is about. He is right. Politics is about power. It's about who should govern. And in that respect, it is the most important thing because it's kind of how we determine what rights we have. But at the end of the day, he wanted to go to a baseball game. He would have loved to have been at the Nats game tonight. He would have been embarrassed.
They did a tribute to him tonight.
And he would have been embarrassed by that. But he would have loved to have been there. And I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody who squeezed more out of life than Dr. Krauthammer.
Guys, thank you so much tonight. Brett, Britt, AB, and Charles, of course. Thank you all so much. We will miss you, Charles, greatly. And a reminder again to watch Bret Baier's special tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, of course, entitled Charles Krauthammer, His Words. And as life goes on in Washington, President Trump schools Democrats on the hard facts on immigration reform. What's going to happen there? You got to hear how clearly he explained just what's at stake in this debate that's so crucial. Oh, what a shock. The media are on a mission to blame Trump for the ongoing crisis at the border, but the facts just keep getting in the way. Here's a prime example of how they're framing the story.
He was once again blaming Democrats for this crisis down on the border when, of course, it is his administration's policy that resulted in the separation of these children from their families.
But inconvenient truths keep popping up, like this headline from McClatchy. Yes, Obama separated families at the border, too. The reality is that this has been going on for decades. Children and adults making this really dangerous journey from Central America up through Mexico and ending up on our doorstep. And at the White House today, President Trump explained during a cabinet meeting why the left has shown little concern for their safety until now.
We have come up with a lot of solutions, but we have Democrats that don't want to approve anything because that's probably, they think, bad for the election that's coming up. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people suffering, and that's unfortunate. Loopholes in our immigration laws, all supported by extremist, open-border Democrats, and that's what they are. They're extremist, open-border Democrats. If you look at Nancy Pelosi, you look at Chuck Schumer, you'll see tapes where they wanted to have borders. They needed borders for security. Just a short while ago, a number of years ago, I see Chuck Schumer, we must have borders. Hillary Clinton, we must have borders. If people penetrate our borders, we must get them out of our country. Now all of a sudden they're big open border people. It's a whole big con job. Democrats also refuse to fund the personnel, the bed space, the resources that we need to house the minors. Now, they want us to take care of the minors, and that's fine. But they don't want to give us the money to take care of them. Because the worse everything looks, they think the better they're going to do with respect to the blue wave.
Democrats claim that they're only concerned for the welfare of the children housed in those shelters, though. But the Trump administration is pointing out how those facilities are a safe haven compared to the long and perilous journey made at the mercy of human traffickers, smugglers, and yes, coyotes.
They've created, and they've let it happen, a massive child smuggling industry. It's exactly what it's become. Traffickers. If you think about this, human traffickers are making a fortune. It's a disgrace. These loopholes force the release of alien families and minors into the country when they illegally cross the border. Since 2014 alone, nearly 200,000 unaccompanied alien minors have been released into the United States as a result of Democrat-backed loopholes, including catch and release, which is one of the worst. One of the reasons I'm being tough, because they do nothing for us at the border. They encourage people, frankly, to walk through Mexico and go into the United States because they're drug traffickers, they're human traffickers, they're coyotes. I mean, we're getting some real beauties.
Years of government neglect and failure to enforce our immigration laws created this crisis. Trump is trying to fix it, but you wouldn't know that from the coverage. So it's up to the president to point out what we have been saying for years. Lousy laws, leftist judges, open borders mentality have created obstacles that make border enforcement difficult, if not impossible, especially when children and families or adults with children they claim are related cross the border.
We have to house these minors, and we have to house them safely. And frankly, we have to house them, and we should be taking good care of them, and then we should return them back home. That's what we have to do. Democrat and court-ordered loopholes prevent family detention and lead to family separation, no matter how you cut it. I signed a very good executive order yesterday, but that's only limited. No matter how you cut it, it leads to separation ultimately. I'm directing HHS, DHS, and DOJ to work together to keep illegal immigrant families together during the immigration process and to reunite these previously separated groups. But the only real solution is for Congress to close the catch and release loopholes that have fueled the child smuggling industry. Mexico, by the way, is doing nothing for us. Nothing. They have the strongest immigration laws. They can do whatever they want. They can keep people out of Mexico. They have a 2,000-mile journey up Mexico. They walk through Mexico like it's walking through Central Park. It's ridiculous. Mexico does nothing for us.
Well, it's the Democrats' choice. They can work with the president to fix the system or keep playing politics. Well, it might help if the media stopped their nonstop war on Trump. That's wishful thinking. The Washington Post today reported that the Trump administration will stop prosecuting parents who cross the border illegally with children. One problem. The story wasn't accurate. The Post neglected to reach out to the Department of Justice, and now the story has been corrected. So if the media were as interested in getting all sides of the story as they are interested in just getting Trump, maybe we could make some real progress and people could actually know things called facts. And here to separate fact from fiction on the border issue is Art Del Cueto, the president of the Border Patrol Union's Tucson office, as well as chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp, and Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook, a former advisor to Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. It's great to have all of you on. We have a lot to get through here. There is so much misperception and misrepresentation about what's been happening at the border. Art, the other night you gave us a fact that I can't stop thinking about. You said it on the show about what happens with these children when they're under 18 and they are sent up through this journey from Guada or Honduras or San Salvador, and they come up through Mexico. And you said as a Border Patrol agent, agents find certain items on the girls, especially the girls. I want you to repeat this story because I think a lot of people who didn't hear it need to hear it.
Well, oftentimes we find them with birth control pills, and they are told that they use these pills because they may get raped along the journey. Now, I'm going to go a little bit off of any talking points here and explain that you were dead on with everything you said. It is sickening that certain members of the media have chosen to attack our president. It is sickening that certain members of the media have chosen to attack Border Patrol agents and describe us as Nazis. That is just, it's disgusting that you would even think that. I don't know where that even comes from. We have minors that we have detained without their parents. We have detained just recently a minor out here in the Tucson sector that their uncle threw him over the fence with nothing but a letter, a little handwritten note in his pocket that said, "Help me find my mom," and the mom's name on that piece of paper. Agents that I know, that I've worked with, myself included, go out there to that field numerous times with our own food that we buy, toys, clothes, and everything else, so we can assist some of these people that we arrest in the border. To compare us to Nazis is a whole new low. That is just the most disgusting thing. These people are idiots for that comparison, or they need to go back to school and actually learn history. They probably fell asleep during history class, is what I think.
Susan, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, even Barack Obama were really, I think, pretty clear back in 2014 that these kids were going to have to go home. President Obama said they were going to have to go home. Literally, we played the bite the other night. Hillary Clinton said they were going to have to go home, the unaccompanied minors and the family units crossing the border. And this is what Nancy Pelosi said when she visited one of the family detention centers in 2014, where Obama was keeping the family units. Let's watch.
What we just saw was so stunning. If you believe, as we do, that every child, every person has a spark of divinity in them and is therefore worthy of respect, what we saw in those rooms was dazzling, sparkling array of God's children worthy of respect. The balance that we're trying to create is to move these kids, these young people, these families as quickly as possible into another setting. We're here to thank the Border Patrol. I think they're doing the best they can under the circumstances.
Susan, a very different attitude back in 2014. Same detention centers. A judge had, I guess, shut one of them, two of them down, the family detention centers, even though they were the best we could deal with. And believe me, as someone who spent a lot of time in Central America, a lot nicer than where a lot of these people sadly come from. Why the change from Pelosi?
Well, now it's 2018, and I think you look at a president who started his whole campaign and his presidency talking about building a wall, citing a whole group of people as racist and rapists and coming from a country. I mean, there are lots of misperceptions. One is not everybody's an unaccompanied minor. What we have seen recently are minors who are accompanied by their parents. And so right in New York yesterday, 229 children are without their parents before the executive order was signed. You can shake your head no, Matt, but it is true.
Susan, 12,400 have been apprehended since the zero tolerance policy went into effect. Certainly. Of those, it's 2,000 who were separated from their parents. In some cases, the people saying they were the parents were not their parents. Children had a credible fear of the adult who were bringing them into the country. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, but the lion's share of the people that HHS is dealing with are, like Art said, they're abandoned by people, or they're trucked through by, but 2,000 and 10,000. So 2,000, you're right, were separated for a variety of reasons. But the 10,000
in New York City
are unaccompanied.
Last night, there were 229 that still have not been united with their parents. That was the number I was dealing with. But, you know, not everybody was called idiotic. I think the move is idiotic, and it's ignorant, because we're not talking about Republicans.
Is it Nazi Germany?
We're not talking about Republicans and Democrats. We're talking about his humanity. I went all over the world.
She thought it was not Nazi Germany back in 2014.
You have to ask Nancy Pelosi that.
Well,
you have to ask Nancy
they
Pelosi
all said that. Matt, gotta get you in on this.
Last time I checked, the Nazis did not bring back 500 of these kids, which have already been brought back this week, to be back with their parents, and they're on a fast track to do that with the rest. And by the way, all President Trump was doing was following the law. This is very important for people to understand. He was following the law that President Obama had to follow, that the courts had established with the executive branch since the 1990s. And when I hear people like Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, come out and call these concentration camps for kids, I think it's time for the RNC to repudiate that kind of talk. This is law enforcement. This is the president following the law. We can have political disagreements, but this is well over the line.
You can't deny the images, though. You can't deny the images of children being torn from their
parents.
From the last administration.
Art deals with the images every day, but the images of children being trafficked and cartel members who are pumping our country with fentanyl and heroin, they're being enriched because of this human trafficking and the coyote smuggling, all have to pay off to the cartels. Do they not, Art?
I mean, you're talking about kids that are being smuggled in the trunks of vehicles. These such great parents, they're such great parents that they're giving their child to a criminal organization so they can put him in a trunk of a vehicle and cross through the desert or cross through very dangerous areas. They're such good parents that they're being thrown over fences without any adult supervision whatsoever, you know, so they can be exposed to the elements. The reality is the pictures that you're seeing from a lot of these media outlets are from the last administration, not from President Trump's administration. You can spin it any way you want, but the reality is I'm out there all the time. I work that border, and I'm telling you right now, things are being done correctly, and there's a lot of people out there in the media that are twisting things around and villainizing something that isn't there. Their hatred towards one president is so amazing that you're blinded to the truth of what's happening right now.
All right, guys, stay right there. We have some breaking news at the border for you next. Plus, the media finds an outrageous new way to criticize the First Lady. You have to see it to believe it. Okay, some quick breaking news. Matt Schlapp kind of stole it from us, but the AP just reported that about 500 children have been reunited with their families after being separated at the border since May, according to the administration. We're going to have more throughout the hour as it comes to us, so that breaking news first. And mission accomplished for the mainstream media, which has managed to dent the First Lady's popularity. They ran weeks of stories with cruel speculation why Melania Trump had disappeared from public view. She's living in another house. She's in New York. She's back in Eastern Europe. Never mind the fact that she just had fairly significant surgery. A new CNN poll shows her favorability rating is down to 51% from 57% last month. I don't know if I believe that. And now that she's back in the public, the media, well, of course, they found a new reason to pounce. Today, the First Lady visited a Texas shelter housing illegal immigrant children. Good for her. But all the media could do was talk about her jacket. They went into a frenzied search for the hidden meanings of the words emblazoned on the back of her jacket, which read, "I really don't care, do you?" Well, First Lady spokeswoman Stephanie Grisham said in a statement, quote, "It's a jacket. There was no hidden message. After today's important visit to Texas, I hope the media isn't going to choose to focus on her wardrobe." Of course, that was wishful thinking. Let's discuss why the First Lady just keeps getting the mean girls treatment from the media. Anita McBride was Chief of Staff to First Lady Laura Bush, and Rachel Campos Duffy is a Fox News contributor. All right, Rachel, the president did tweet out that it was a comment about fake news. Like, in other words, Melania doesn't care about the fake news, do you? And it was more importantly, it was a jacket from Zara, Z-A-R-A, and it was $39. I mean, you know, so I don't know.
Zara. And you do remember when Michelle Obama went to a homeless feeding event or center and wore $500 sneakers. Yeah. But look, it is an odd choice to wear that. Let's all be clear. It is a little of a head scratcher.
Who's her staffer? I mean, I don't want them to get mad at me because everyone look, I'm not a fashion plate myself, but sorry, but people at Fox News, they're great. I love the Fox News. But, you know, I'm more of a jeans and T-shirt kind of person. I'm not like a girly good. But Melania is so spectacular. She's spectacularly beautiful. I don't even like to stand next to her. She's so beautiful. But that was a odd. And if it's a message, then say I'm goofing on you, media. But
and we may get that. We may find out that that's what it is. I mean, it is a head scratcher. I'm a political spouse. I would not have worn that jacket.
No logos. No logos.
No, I would not have worn that jacket. That said, all the amazing outfits that she's worn, they've never write about it all. If you don't watch conservative press, you don't hear all of that. And she makes one misstep. I am curious to see why she wore it. What's the media?
A staffer should say, no.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, because she probably just threw, who knows, she probably just thrown it on. Like, I just grab whatever's in my closet. I'm like, wait a second, your jacket's inside out. That's what
I don't think Melania just grabs anything.
No, right? Okay, so it was a message. It's ingenious if it was. Anita.
Well, I think that actually was the most valuable comment about this whole issue. As a political spouse, you understand the optics around things like that. And yes, I don't want to say anything negative about the staff either. I know how tough their job is every single day.
But that is their job.
Those are the little nuances that you try and take care of. Yeah.
So you don't want to probably wear the stiletto Manolo Blahniks to.
You don't want it to be a distraction.
I did love that look, Laura. She looked fabulous going to the hurricane. But then she took off her heels. She wore them to get onto Air Force One. She put on her sneakers when she got there. But again, it's just this constant attacks on her. It never ends. And let's face it, they think she's complicit in her husband.
Same thing with Ivanka. They were trashing Ivanka today. They were going after Ivanka. What does Ivanka do in the White House? Well, I mean, non-stop trashing her. The Time magazine cover about President Trump was ridiculous. We finally found out that child, God bless that child, was not one of the children separated from their parents. So they're using children as props in magazine covers as well. The Root, which apparently is some kind of publication, has a headline, "Dear Melania Trump, please stop trying to be the moral compass for the White House. You're trash too."
unbelievable.
Outrageous.
But again, but that is a message not just to Melania. That is a message to all conservative women. They say that we are complicit. They say that we are traitors to our gender because we choose to think for ourselves. And that is and they want, it's a warning to anyone who dares to see the amazing, fabulous economic news and rethink this.
Right.
Remember, don't forget, this week, what happened in Duluth was sort of overshadowed by this event. This is the heart of union, Democrat, working class, and he goes in there. They love him. The Democrats are losing working class Americans, and this is all an attempt to cover up all of that good
And
news.
I have to say, on the separating the children from the families, obviously 500 reunited tonight, but the polling on this, as I suspected, people are not blaming President Trump on this. They're blaming, bad policies and, sadly, irresponsible parents sending children and bringing children on these harrowing journeys. So the public is not where the elites are on this border issue. Everyone has compassion, but they're not blaming President Trump for it.
I think people should. I hope that they read what Mrs. Trump's statement was today after she returned to the White House. I thought it was a really beautiful statement that her visit down there really moved her, and what she said, these children are in this position not through their own fault, but the fault of adults. And that's why I wish this congressional picnic had happened tonight, because she could have been our modern day Dolly Madison, working that crowd of all these members of Congress. This is really up to you to fix this.
It is one of the few bipartisan events, and they canceled it. I understand why they did that, but again, I think that
it'd be trash if they had it. It's like your picnic.
There's no way they could have survived the media onslaught. But your guest that was on from the Border Patrol, by the way, can I mention almost 60% of Border Patrol are Hispanics?
Yep.
And what he said about those children, as that information starts to get out, thank you for getting that information out. The border, the detention centers are far safer than the journey that these children just came on. And I will say this, people aren't stupid. I spoke to some African Americans who say, gosh, the conditions of the detention center are better than some of the projects that I grew up in. People are looking at this and saying, let's not smear our Border Patrol. They're trying to do the best they can. These children were brought here under horrible, irresponsible circumstances.
And Mrs. Trump, and I saw First Lady Trump, just how someone deals with children. Like, just when she met my kids who are always, like, totally out of control. And just the way she deals with them, gets down low with them. And you can tell someone by the way they treat children. And for all of you trashing Melania Trump, nice try. It's not working, and you're digging yourself into a deeper hole.
You know what, Laura, though? She's floating above all of it.
Oh, yeah, I think
really
so. I think
she's remarkable that way.
She's classy, and she's winning over people's hearts very quietly in her own style, and she refuses to do it their way. She's doing it her own way.
Yeah, and isn't that what we want in women? Shouldn't women do it? She's not going to be like Michelle Obama. She's not going to be like, but if anyone said anything about the Obama daughters, like they said about that Barron Trump and that horrible comment about Barron Trump, I mean, they would be doing nonstop coverage of it.
Absolutely.
All right, great panel. Thank you so much to both of you. And up next, exclusive new details, what Congress may do to DOJ and the FBI brass. They don't turn over those key documents to Congress. Pronto. Stay there.
We know when they grow up.
Fox News has learned new details about an ultimatum congressional investigators delivered to the FBI director and the Deputy Attorney General. Fox's Catherine Herridge reporting that a trio of House committee chairmen gave the DOJ and FBI 3 days to turn over key documents last Friday. And two sources tell Fox that committee chairs Trey Gowdy, Bob Goodlatte, and Devin Nunes demanded records about intelligence activities and the FBI's alleged use of informants before it opened that Russia collusion probe in July 2016. Well, now that deadline has passed, House Speaker Paul Ryan says that he has not ruled out citing Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein for contempt of Congress. Let's discuss these developments with former Whitewater Deputy Independent Counsel Saul Weisenberg, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Robert Driscoll. It's great to see both of you. Robert, how serious is this? Contempt of Congress, the Deputy Attorney General? I mean, Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress over that Fast and Furious stuff, and nothing really happened there. But how serious is this?
I think it's pretty serious, particularly when it's your own party threatening to hold you in contempt. I mean, I really do think that the DOJ wants to avoid that. at all costs. But I think that there's just a dispute here that it doesn't look good for anyone right now. And I think there's a lack of trust on both sides. And I think, especially after the IG report, I suspect what's happening now is when a report like that comes out, people in the agency feel a little more free to talk about it because they know what's out there. Some of their bosses that they're working under are now gone.
Wounded.
And I suspect that some people have probably told some friends on the Hill what they should be expecting. And when the people on the Hill don't see it, I think they're squawking about it now. So we'll see how this gets resolved.
Saul, speaking of which, the Democrats are calling this all, kind of deficient. And we have Paul Ryan apparently last Friday, as Catherine told us, is not ruling out contempt of Congress. People thought, well, Ryan would kind of back away from that, but he hasn't. So we're looking at a potential serious showdown tomorrow.
Well, if you saw Congressman Gowdy over the weekend, he indicated, and I don't think I've ever seen him so mad, and he gets mad a lot, he indicated that contempt really wasn't enough. He said we'll use the full panoply of our constitutional powers, and what good is contempt? Look what happened with Holder. So who knows what they'll do. It's not clear to me whether or not there has been partial compliance so far. I guess we'll see. As to your other point about the procedural default in the subpoena that the Democrats are claiming is there, do you really expect Rod Rosenstein to say, I'd love to give this over, but the Democrats say you've broken the rules? I don't see that happening. He's either going to give the stuff over or he's not. If he doesn't give it over, he's not going to rely on an internal rules violation that the Democrats have brought up.
Bob, do you think anyone at DOJ, tipped off, the Democrats here on this? A little curious how this.
No, I think that's just the Democrats looking to weaken the subpoena. But I totally agree. There's no way a Republican DOJ is going to rely on a technical deficiency to not respond.
Jeff Sessions was on Howie Carr's radio show today and talked about Peter Strzok. Let's watch.
Is Strzok still on the payroll of the FBI?
Mr. Strzok has, as I understand, has lost his security clearance.
Well, yay, Saul! Get out the champagne, Saul. He's lost his security clearance. He was marched out of the building, but it's not clear whether he just lost his security clearance, like today, or whether that happened when he left the building. How much jeopardy is he in? Could he be in any jeopardy other than losing his job at this point, Saul? I mean, we're thinking that documents might have been altered. That's another issue we're looking at. Those 302 documents may or not be related to Strzok himself. But what else could happen here?
I haven't heard that they're related to Strzok, and we have just very piecemeal news on that. But supposedly, according to Congressman Meadows, there was potentially improper alteration of a 302, which is, as you know, is what the FBI calls their reports of interviews with people who they question. But we have no idea what is meant by that. I've read one account that said that Andrew McCabe demanded that something be changed, but that's all total speculation at this point. And there are some ways in which 302s can be changed that are perfectly proper, and other ways that aren't. As far as Strzok is concerned,
real quick,
he has certain due process rights as an employee. I don't think he's in any criminal trouble, but I think he's a short timer for sure.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Fantastic panel. The latest unhinged lunacy from the left. Next.